Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You are on the Steady Coach. And today's video is probably the most important video you are going to watch about neural circuit dizziness and other symptom recovery if you are dealing with a lot of health anxiety and or obsessive compulsive tendencies. I think this video will be useful to anyone, but if you have health anxiety or obsessive compulsive tendencies, this video is essential viewing. In this video, we're going to talk about how health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies work in the context of neural circuit dizziness, and specifically how they make neural circuit dizziness symptoms worse and last longer. And then we're going to talk about what is different about neural circuit dizziness and symptom recovery when you have OCD, health anxiety, or obsessive compulsive tendencies, and how to put these into practice. Before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And I'm going to be assuming in this video that you understand the basics of neural circuit dizziness. If you are new to my channel and you don't know what neural circuit dizziness is, or you were recently diagnosed with PPPD, MDDS, vestibular migraine, or another symptom-based disorder, or you have chronic dizziness symptoms that doctors can't explain, or you have medically unexplained other symptoms like tinnitus or sound sensitivity or light sensitivity, you must pause the video here and watch the basics videos below. This will give you context to understand the rest of the video. Now, if you already understand neural circuit dizziness, and I suspect that many of you with health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies already understand it very well because you've probably watched every video on my channel already. You already know that a cycle of fear, anxiety, and stressors that feed fear and anxiety are causing your symptoms to stay chronic. You also understand that this is a software problem, meaning your brain is misinterpreting sensory information from your eyes, ears, and or sense of touch, and that this is leading to the perception of symptoms that are 100% real, but reversible, because software problems can be rewired. You probably have also learned from my videos that in order to complete this rewiring process, you have to break this cycle. And this is where many of you with health anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder get stuck. You say, okay, in order to recover, what I need to do is stop being afraid, stop being anxious, and stop being stressed out. So you watch all my videos and you try to implement all the advice. And this is no small task because I have hundreds of videos now talking about topics ranging from relationships to emotions, to fear, to health anxiety, to physical exercise, to movement. It can be a lot. Unfortunately, for those of you who are trying to implement all this advice right now and who are dealing with a ton of health anxiety and a ton of obsessive compulsive tendencies, you are going to notice not only that this increases your despair, because you're not going to see results by doing this, it will also in many cases make your anxiety even worse. And you'll be thinking to yourself, I'm doing everything Yonit says I should be doing to get better. Why is it not working for me? In order to understand this, we're going to first take a look at how the health anxiety and or obsessive compulsive tendency cycle plays in to this neural circuit dizziness cycle. Then we're going to talk about what you can do about it. Here's how the cycle works. Step 1, you experience anxiety. This anxiety can be triggered by a lot of different things. It can be triggered by external triggers, things that aren't directly in your control, such as symptom increases, or physical situations that have previously brought on symptoms, or other outside stressors that don't have anything to do with symptoms, like trouble at work, or your kid misbehaving, or your pet being sick. All of these things can lead to an increase in anxiety. These triggers can also be internal. For example, you might just have a spontaneous thought that invokes some fear, or you might experience an emotion or a feeling that you don't like, and you're trying to turn it down, you're trying to avoid it, those things can also increase anxiety. Step 2, this spike in anxiety, of course, is uncomfortable for everyone, but it becomes particularly intolerable to those of you with OCD tendencies or anxiety because of what happens next. Step 2 is when you naturally start to amplify that anxiety. Some of this may be voluntary and some of this may be involuntary. Some of you are going to do things like, for example, catastrophize. So if in step 1 you had a fear thought, you might notice that thought and then start to build on a whole bunch of what ifs or slippery slopes about how this is going to definitely lead to the worst possible outcome. For example, if I keep feeling this way, I'm never going to get rid of my fear and then I'm never going to get better. You might also have a sense of just not being able to tolerate this level of discomfort from the anxiety. I just can't take this level of anxiety and or symptoms anymore. You may start to notice some urgency to fix it. Oh my gosh, I've got to get rid of this feeling. It's either so uncomfortable or it's definitely causing my symptoms to get worse. I've got to get rid of it. Another really common one is you might find yourself shaming yourself. I am a bad parent for having this particular dizziness issue and this anxiety. I've got to get rid of it. Otherwise, I'm a terrible person. Unfortunately, even though you're not necessarily having any of these reactions on purpose, all of these reactions stir up the anxiety. They make the anxiety worse. Step 1, we had anxiety just show up as it does. Step 2, your health anxiety or OCD starts to ramp up the anxiety and make it more aggressive. Naturally, you're even more uncomfortable now. So in step 3, you attempt to bring the anxiety down through all sorts of different means. This stage is what I call the fixer stage. It's when all of those fixer strategies show up to try to relieve a lot of the anxiety that you're feeling because understandably, it's super uncomfortable. Fixers can show up in all sorts of different ways. Here are some of the most common ones. Ruminating, which essentially is you trying to think your way out of the problem. Researching, trying to get more information in the hopes of reducing the anxiety. Trying to get reassurance to relieve the anxiety. Maybe talking to friends, maybe going on social media groups. Maybe seeing more doctors. And a sneaky one is avoiding triggers. I think of this as a fixer too. You say to yourself, wow, this is really terrible. I don't want to experience this again. So I'm going to make sure whatever that trigger was, I don't deal with it in the future. I'm going to just avoid it. Now, if the fixers didn't do anything initially, it probably wouldn't be so bad. The issue is the fixers actually sort of work temporarily. And in step 4, that's exactly what happens. You have a drop in anxiety initially from having the fixer show up. You know that feeling you get when you're really scared that something might be very serious and you go on Google or WebMD and then you look it up and you realize you don't have that thing? That feeling of like, everything's going to be okay now. That enormous relief is the result of a fixer helping you with your anxiety. The problem is that when the fixers relieve the anxiety, our brain gets a very particular message. It gets the message, in order to relieve my anxiety, I need to do this thing in order to fix it. So the next time that that trigger happens and the uncomfortable anxiety and fears show up, what I need to do is get you to fix again. Your brain essentially learns that when you have anxiety, what it needs to do is ramp up the anxiety more to get you to do more fixing. Again, if this worked permanently, no problem. The problem is that every time you do this, it's temporary and you're reinforcing to your brain that the next time you get anxious or you get fearful, you're going to need to fix again. And when repeated over time, the fixers unfortunately become less and less effective, and the anxiety needs to go ever higher to try to get you to fix things. And you get stuck in this anxiety fixing cycle. So in order to recover from neural circuit dizziness and other symptoms, What you're going to need to do if you're stuck in a cycle like this is break the cycle. Because as long as that cycle is going, never-ending supplies of fear and anxiety are reinforcing that chronic dizziness cycle, particularly if you're trying to do things to fix symptoms. This is where some of the general advice that I give on my channel can be really not helpful for people with health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies. Things like parasympathetic breathing or somatic tracking are incredible tools, and I encourage almost everyone to use them. But when you notice you're using them as a way of relieving anxiety and fixing it, and it's temporary, and then the anxiety comes back even worse, and then you have to keep doing it harder just to get the anxiety to come down, and then eventually it just stops working, this has become part of a fixing anxiety cycle, and it's not helping you get better. So here's how we break this cycle if you suspect that you're in it. It's actually quite simple, though it is definitely not easy. Step 1 is to interrupt the cycle in step 2. So step 2, to remind you, is when the amplification or increase in the volume dial of that anxiety happens. Whether you're doing it voluntarily or not, at this stage, people with health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies need to learn to tolerate the increase in anxiety. As I said, simple, not easy. And I'm going to give you some ideas for what you can do in this situation shortly. Step 2 is to interrupt the cycle in step 3, where the fixers come in. In this case, what we're going to do is prevent the fixers from fixing. So essentially, the anxiety goes up, it goes up, it goes up, and you don't fix. When you do this over time, your brain starts to learn, first of all, that it doesn't do anything good for it to ramp up the anxiety because you're not fixing anymore. And it also starts to gain confidence that you're not afraid of fear. Essentially, that's what health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies mean. You're avoiding fear by trying to fix it. So the solution is teaching yourself over time to tolerate fear and anxiety without trying to fix it. So here's how the general neural circuit dizziness and symptom recovery process is going to look for those of you with obsessive compulsive tendencies and health anxiety. Stage 1 is pretty much just like everyone else's stage 1. Your job is to learn what you need to learn about neural circuit dizziness and other symptoms so that you can feel somewhat confident that all this information applies to you. And you're going to do that by watching YouTube videos on this channel, maybe taking my free course, link in the video description below, 100% free, very comprehensive, reading books about mind, body, or neural circuit disorders, maybe even joining a neural circuit dizziness or other support group, getting reassurance from other people. All this is the standard advice, whether you have anxiety or not. Stage 2 is where things start to look different. Stage 2 is when you start to notice that the things that you're doing to try to reduce your fear and anxiety are actually making them worse, or that you're doing them obsessively to try to get rid of fear and anxiety, and it's not really working. At this point, you're going to de-escalate the anxiety fixing cycle, just like we described in the previous part of this video. And you're going to do that by over time building your tolerance to fear and anxiety, which I'll describe in a little more detail shortly, and not allowing the fixers to come in and fix the fear and anxiety. So how this looks practically is starting small. I know that many of you are A+ students, so once you identify, wow, I have this health anxiety or OCD cycle going on, and I want to fix that too in order to get better from neural circuit dizziness, I hear you. I know you want to get better as quickly as possible. You do not want to A+ student this. You want to start small. So you want to pick particular patterns of anxiety and fixing that you've noticed throughout your routine or in your life right now. And you're going to pick the ones that are maybe a little less scary to start with. This is probably a good time to interject that if you have obsessive compulsive disorder or a lot of health anxiety or obsessive compulsive tendencies, and you have the capability to work with a trained therapist who understands exposure and response prevention, this is the time to work with a trained therapist if you can. I always want to put this information out there for free because not everyone has access to a professional, but if you do have access to one, I strongly recommend it. You're going to pick a few scenarios in your life where you know you get triggered, you know it brings up fear and anxiety, and maybe not the scariest one to start with. And you're going to practice either in an imaginary way or when the situation comes up, allowing the fear and anxiety to be there without trying to fix it. So what this might look like in reality is, okay, I know that I get triggered by looking at YouTube comments from people who are not getting better. You might imagine one of the most recent comments you read that made you feel this way. Really notice the fear and anxiety coming up inside you. Notice the urge to then Google or reassure yourself or whatever you normally do to try to fix that anxiety. And instead of trying to fix it, you're going to do things like allow the anxiety to be there, allow the fear to be there, float through it, don't fight it, stop resisting it. Again, you can use whatever words you want. I strongly recommend involving your body in this. One beautiful phrase from one of the coaching group participants that she has been using is loosen. So loosen and allow the fear and anxiety to be there. And this may not feel good. This may not feel pleasant. It may feel like the fear and anxiety amplify. It's going to be tough, but you are tougher. You're already dealing with neural circuit dizziness. You can do this, and it will pay off because you're teaching your brain that fear and anxiety alone are not dangerous. And in time, your brain will learn that it doesn't need to overreact every time fear and anxiety come up, and you don't need to fix it. For many of you with health anxiety and obsessive compulsive tendencies, you're going to recover right here without needing to do anything else. And you're going to hear that in some of the success stories. In particular, if you listen to Austin's success story or Ami's success story, most of what they did to recover was break this fear, anxiety fixing cycle. For those of you who feel like you're starting to master this skill, but you're still dealing with symptoms, stage 3 is when you start to implement the other things that I talk about on my channel. So at this point, you can start to practice how you respond to symptoms differently. You can do graded exposure activities with symptoms. You can start to work on emotional awareness and expression, either with a therapist or with a friend or by yourself or by journaling. You can do meditation and mindfulness practices. All of the things that I talk about now apply to you, but my goal for you in stage 3, if you decide you need it, is to see it in more of a personal growth, teaching my brain that the symptoms aren't dangerous way, rather than a desperate attempt to claw yourself out of a pit of fear and anxiety. If you still feel that much fear and anxiety, you're still in stage 2 and need to focus on that for now. I hope this was a helpful video for all of you. I'm really looking forward to your questions and comments about this one. Such a large group of you fall into the category of people who've had or have health anxiety or obsessive compulsive tendencies. So I really felt I needed to clear up some of the misunderstandings here and make sure you know this needs to be the focus of your recovery initially. All right, please like this video, share it, subscribe to my channel. These things all help me reach more people, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.